Ryan, you mentioned that all dynasty managers kind of hit the freeze button, hit the pause button on Watson, and there's not a lot of movement. But he certainly has a value. He has an ADP, which is 121 overall, and quarterback 14 in single quarterback leagues. So where do we really stand as a dynasty community when it comes to Watson and his value?
Well, I mean, it's obviously the situation has impacted his value, and missing an entire year impacted his value. But considering that, we're towards the end of February here and we still don't know anything for certain, it kind of feels like he's maintained his value about as well as could be expected. I mean, the upside is obviously there. If the decision makers come out tomorrow and say there are no charges and all the civil complaints are somehow gone, and this whole issue is just wiped away, now he's going to be a top 6 or 7 quarterback again immediately.
Yeah, I kind of think that's where the risk reward opportunity becomes pretty clear at that range. You mentioned the one quarterback ADP over in the Superflex ADP from January. He's at quarterback 16, the 39th pick overall. So just behind Tua, Stafford, Rodgers, and Wilson. I think that's where it really gets interesting. The people that can maybe acquire him, I think, are the ones that might be wanting to pay that closer to that QB 12 kind of range. Like, to me, he's obviously behind Hurts and everybody above him, the rookies, the popular rookies that we like from last year, and then all of the studs that we know. Whereas he's clearly ahead of that next tier with Mac Jones and Tannehill and Carr and that ilk, I think. So I think the dynasty community is doing a really good job of valuing him appropriately right now. And the people that are going to be able to make a move to acquire him are the ones that are going to pay just a little bit more than that.
I kind of disagree because of that, Matt. It really feels to me like maybe the dynasty community has sat on our laurels just a little bit and wiped our hands clean a little bit of the whole situation, and that has pushed him down a little farther than he really should be. It sounds ridiculous to me that an elite quarterback that's only 26 years old won't ever return to that level once again. Get on the football field and actually return to that level. I know these are serious allegations and there's a lot of things that we need to consider, but even if there is another waiting period, let's say it is another year, if it's via suspension or the Texans can't trade him or there's some kind of jail time or anything that could come of all this, he's still only 26 years old. And we've seen guys disappear for a time and come back and play at an elite level. I think of Michael Vick, and he was much older. So I think a lot of us, especially in these Superflex leagues, should be pouncing on this opportunity to grab Watson right now. I was looking at Superflex ADP, and starting at about 19 through where he is at 39, I would say about 75% of those players I would trade for Deshaun Watson right now in the right situation. From Jalen Hurts and Aaron Rodgers and Matthew Stafford at quarterback to just about every position player. Alvin Kamara, who's a handful of spots above him, Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler. I would trade most of the receivers in that range for him. Right now, he's 26 years old. These guys don't grow on trees. We've been trying to collect these quarterbacks for years. And in Superflex leagues, you need 2 of them. So
it seems like a move you have to make if you're not competing. Like Dan, like if you're a strong competitor, you're like a top 3 team or something, and somebody says, I'll give you Watson for Rodgers and he's your quarterback 2, or maybe even your quarterback 1. You're making that move right now?
I think I am contender? Because that's one of those moves that makes you a dynasty instead of just a contender for 2022. Michael Thomas, guys. We've kind of avoided him for about 18 months. Not a lot of conversations about Michael Thomas, guys. But there was news this past week that they did a restructure down there in New Orleans. So that pretty much guarantees Thomas is going to be back with the Saints for 2022 and maybe even beyond, the way some of the cap analyzer guys are talking. That creates a little bit of a hardship for the Saints to move on even after this year, potentially.
It's funny. We talked about Deshaun Watson and some of the news that he's been involved in lately. We did that last week, and Michael Thomas kind of feels like the same story, that dynasty managers don't know exactly what to do with him. He's obviously lost some value. A lot of times when we see those players miss the entire season, around this time of year, once the regular season's over and we're well into the off season, we'll see the value of those players start to trend back up with the assumption that they're going to be ready to play by the next season. And we're not seeing that with Michael Thomas right now. His February ADP is actually 76 overall. That's his lowest ADP ever. His entire career, dating back to February of 2016, his rookie season. It actually ties last November. So November of 21, current ADP, both 76 overall, his lowest point. I don't know what to do with this guy either. We've talked about Kamara and some other players on the Saints team. In general, I've got the same concerns with Thomas as I do some of those other guys. We don't know what this offense is going to look like. We don't know who the quarterback is. Michael Thomas is nearly 30 years old. Other than being majorly discounted from where he was a couple of years ago, I don't see a lot of reasons to buy him.
I just pulled up the trade finder. He went for the 202 for a couple of second round picks before they were revealed to be the number. So I'm not sure where they lie, but It looks like that's about the price. I mean,
the 202.
Is that too much?
No,
I don't think that's too much. Yeah, that seems like a buy, right?
It's Wan'Dale Robinson or something. But like, to Dan's point, why would you sell for that at this point?
No doubt worth any second round pick to add Michael
Especially
Thomas
in this class.
He adds some of that value back. I think the question becomes a question when you start talking about that mid to late first round pick, which is what a Michael Thomas manager who's held him through these injuries is going to want. At the very least, at least a savvy manager will want that. And I would assume that if you're holding Thomas and somebody comes to you and wants him at this point, you want that mid to late first and probably a sweetener on top. And that's when you have a problem making the deal and paying those kind of prices. A lot of Michael Thomas managers out there that have been holding and they intend on putting him into their lineup this coming season, hoping to get wide receiver 2 type numbers. And Ryan, you kind of alluded to it. We don't know who the quarterback is. We don't know what that offensive play calling will look like now that Sean Payton has moved on. And, there's just so many questions down there in New Orleans that the last time we saw Michael Thomas, he was setting records. Mm-hmm. And even if you don't have those expectations, which you shouldn't at this point, I think a normal fantasy football player or Saints fan is expecting 80 plus catches and 120 plus targets. That translates pretty quickly into a wide receiver 2. If those are the expectations, maybe we should be considering making these types of moves.
And I think those numbers are a lock almost. If he's healthy, I think 120 targets at 80 receptions are almost a lock. Whoever the quarterback is, because there's nobody else there. The Marquez Callaway experiment was fun. Traquan Smith was never fun. Of course, that you would hope they're going to invest something in the draft, but I don't know exactly how much draft capital they have to throw out at a wide receiver position, considering the other things they need on that team. Primarily a quarterback, I guess. Their defense is still fairly sound. The offensive line, I guess, is still pretty good. So maybe they will throw a bunch of capital at it. But even if it is like the best rookie in the class, which it's not going to be, then even still, I think Thomas is a lock for that 80 catch number if he is healthy.
Calvin Ridley suspended for gambling on football games. I was just my mind went 100 different ways, Ryan, when you told me that.
Yeah.
We just went through such a tough season as Calvin Ridley fans, Calvin Ridley managers in our dynasty leagues, and now he's going to miss at least the entire 2022 season for gambling on NFL games last year, which happened in late November, a 5-day period where he was kind of away from the team. He said for mental health reasons. And that suspension is going to be revisited in 2023. So it's at least one full season. What is your general thoughts, Ryan, on how a dynasty manager should move forward when it comes to Ridley? Should we try to move him? Should we be trying to trade him? Or are we just stuck with this problem for at least a year?
I think I would be trying to move him right now. I think you can get a second rounder for him. I mentioned this on another podcast. I think probably the better way to go, rather than shopping for picks, is to sell him for a veteran, for a player. I think it's going to be a lot easier to get a player who's worth a late first than to actually get a late first for Ridley, which It's just not going to happen at this point. Anywhere in that 75 range, in our latest or in our current rankings, we're talking about guys like Darnell Mooney, Allen Robinson, Damian Harris. That's kind of the range you could be shopping for. Again, it could be argued that those guys are all worth late first or early seconds. You could maybe get those players, not going to get that late first round pick.
I did pull up the trade finder to see if anything has happened today. I don't have the time on these, but these did happen today, March 7th on Monday. We have 2.07 straight up. So like Ryan was talking for a mid-second, if you want to pick instead of a player, Ridley and a second for a 2023 second and a 24 first.
Those sound like they happened after the news.
Yeah, right. Those are the only two we have that have happened today, the day of the news came out. So, second round pick or a veteran player that's going to help you this year. I think that's the move.
If I'm not contending though, and I have 25 or more roster spots, I think I'm going to hold on to Ridley and hope for the best rather than take the roll of the dice on one of them young players or whatever I get in free agency. I really like the Allen Robinson path, even Thielen. Go replace that production if you're contending. But if you're not, there's a chance there's a spike and it's only 12 months away. That's a long wait, but if you're not contending already, it doesn't seem so bad.
I did a Twitter poll that got a pretty good response, a couple thousand votes. Just, will Calvin Ridley ever play in the NFL again? And essentially it was kind of a 67-33 result. So 2/3 of the respondents do expect him to play again. I do as well. There's still at least a little bit of concern that because of the seriousness of this issue and just because of all the other questions about him. Where does he play? Is he even going to be able to stay in shape? I don't think we should just assume that, with almost 2 years out of the game that he's going to come in at 28 and a half years old and be ready to go week 1 of 2023. I know in my rankings over at DLF, overall rankings, I had him 44 overall in my top 250 prior to that news. And that was that put him at wide receiver 24. I dropped him to 97 overall and wide receiver 46. So that's kind of where I'm looking at him right now.